Welcome back to the Rob Manus Show, ladies and gentlemen. It's good to be back with you, and we've got a great show this week. The big headline for this show is war over Taiwan on the horizon sooner than anybody thinks? Just before China's Communist Party Congress this week, President Xi made a speech in which he reiterated that the Chinese would take the island by force if necessary. That prompted Secretary of State Tony Blinken to make a public comment, I'm sure much to his chagrin, that it appeared the communists have accelerated their plans to retake the island. I say to his chagrin because the leading organization trying to convince Americans and her politicians of this reality, the Committee on the Present Danger of China, just released an extensive report highlighting that the Chinese communists are already at war with us and that this movement forward is a distinct possibility. My guest and I are both members of the CPDC in all transparency, but he's also a new author with his book, The Nation Will Follow, having just been released. John Mills is a former senior Defense Department official, a retired Army colonel, and an expert that you want to follow if you want to keep tabs on China, election integrity, and much more. John, welcome back to the Rob Manus Show.
Hey, thank you, Rob. Always an honor to be with you. Now, I think we're going back almost 2 years, or maybe even 2 years plus. So it's always an honor to be on your show.
Yeah, it's good to have you. Well, a lot of movement this week on the Chinese Communist side, as I mentioned in my opening. President Xi, I mean, everything he does really has purpose to it. For him, he always gives a speech just before the party Congress, doesn't he?
Well, right. And that kind of came across our time Sunday, kind of East Coast through Pacific time. They're roughly 12 hours ahead of us. But yeah, he up front in his speech, and this was the third party Congress. Each of these designates the beginning of a 5-year term where they essentially vote in, air quote, with, I'm sure, some form of election machine for a 5-year term for the president. This is unprecedented. This would be a third term. Only Mao Zedong has achieved a third term. But up front in the speech was Taiwan, which usually it's more relegated to the back of the speech, and the language was more assertive. You could say almost aggressive. So on that, he also talked about zero COVID, which is code word and translation for societal control, because they'll direct, total isolation, masking up, and nobody moving. They've done that to Shanghai, which is perceived as a center of possible opposition. And also, he really mentioned the acceleration of the already breathtaking pace of the size, scale, scope, and quantity of the Chinese military buildup. Which really is leaving us in the dust. And so very concerning speech out of Xi at the front end of the party Congress.
Yeah, I mean, most of the so-called establishment, I hate to use the term experts because I know experts and these people don't strike me as experts on intelligence, were saying that they wouldn't really move on Taiwan if they were going to for another 5 years or so. I know that I think personally, looking at all the information that's going on, and some of those that I've heard speak on the committee think that it's going to be much sooner than that. And I'd say 2025 at the latest. What should we be seeing from a military movement perspective that can be caught on open source intelligence and those kind of things? What kind of things are we looking for to prove one way or the other?
Well, the manifest visible indicator is essentially a loadout for an amphibious operation. And when you load, whether they're built for the purpose amphibious warfare ships like our Navy and their Navy, they've basically mimicked our large deck amphibious warships, which are essentially medium-sized aircraft carriers. on our landing ship dock and our landing dock personnel, which carry additional troops, equipment, supplies, landing craft. It's going to be loading out these things in mass on large scale. It's going to be very visible, very messy. Lots of, not to be too wonkish on the logistics terms, lots of frustrated cargo. And that's cargo that arrived early, cargo arrived in the wrong sequence, cargo that arrived with no proper instructions. It's just going to be a mess. It's going to be very visible. And then you add in all the commercial vessels that are being essentially, excuse the expression, shanghaied to use in this, and those are not normally used. So it's going to be a messy, visible operation. I know they're going to try and do it surreptitiously and probably try to do it from many ports, but it's going to be kind of, the indicators are going to be there. But I think really missed in the noise of just about everything was the Biden administration announcement on last Thursday, of right before the party Congress, of a very severe restrictive measure on China in terms of computer chip production. And this is very unusual in export control. Now, U.S. persons, and there are a lot of American nationals in China helping China, U.S. persons are now prohibited. So they have to drop your pencil, stop what you're doing, push yourself away from the desk, stop everything, or you are in violation of U.S. law. Why would they do this? When we know that the administration is, some are straight bought out, some are ideologically off the charts, some are just crazy and just snooty, air in the nose in the air. They don't know what they're doing, but there is a very strong pro-chip sentiment in a lot of the Blue Caucus, and they want that chip manufacturing in America. That's a good thing. These control measures should have put in a while ago, but that essentially, imagine this is July 1941, and Roosevelt has just told Japan, you are now cut off from oil and rubber in Malaya, which means Japan would die, which kicked off the final planning sequence for Pearl Harbor. This is what essentially that announcement of the chip restriction did to China. It essentially asphyxiated China. They need those chips desperately.
Wow. I mean, that's an incredible move. It seems quite escalatory on the United States part.
It was a necessary move that should have been done a while ago. President Trump was on the pathway to doing that. There was just this matter of this Chinese interference in an election, which we can talk about Kennock Company, and
we're going to get to that.
to their ties to China. But this should have been done a while ago. But it is a bit abrupt, no notice. And the Chinese are probably going, what in the world is going on with all that money we paid your son and to you, if you don't remember? Why are you doing this to us? Again, this is that they're not seeing the ROI, return on investment, for a lot of money they sunk into Hunter and the big guy. And so they are PO'd, would be the term of art.
Yeah, because when you put your money out there, you expect a return on investment. And when the good guys, that's us Americans, win one, it pisses off the investors that have invested in what I call the Biden crime family, and all of their supporters on the left and the right in this country. It's just atrocious what's going on. Now, the party Congress, there was some kind of rumor going around the last 6 months that Xi, one of two things was going to happen. He's going to be named emperor for life, basically president for life, dictator, whatever you want to call him, or you're going to see opposition to him. Did anything come out of this Communist Party Congress that would indicate one way or the other what's going to happen with Xi?
Well, it's still ongoing. The Party Congress is in many ways a week long event
Hmm.
with breakout meetings, meetings on this, meetings on that. They go multiple days, so it's essentially still in progress right now. But just a few weeks ago, there was this mystery after she traveled to Uzbekistan, one of the Stan countries right above Afghanistan,
Hmm.
and also known as Chaosistan. And so, dictators don't like to leave their countries. That is red alert for a possible coup. So he went to meet with Putin. Putin played the role of Mussolini, hapless Mussolini, who could not suppress and wipe out the Ethiopians despite his advanced army. Putin is just getting his clock cleaned with a paltry percentage of the promised supplies arriving in Ukraine. So it was very interesting the theatrics there as she played the dissatisfied father, dissatisfied with his ne'er do well son who couldn't take the Ukraine in 72 hours. And guess what? She comes back, and then there's several days of drama all over social media and media. Where's she, what happened? I'm pretty sure there was some bloodletting of one form or another when he came back, but in the end, who opened the Congress, who gave the speech? It was she. So whatever happened, he prevailed. And having been involved in regime changes, unfortunately, a lot of people died. It's a very bloody, ugly affair.
Hmm. Yeah.
I am sure some people did not survive the bloodletting when he came back.
Absolutely. Well, that's unfortunate. I hate to see dictator for life for anybody, even countries that we think are democracies, which aren't. At least in those cases, the people can at least swap out one for the other. The So on the Russia-Ukraine war issue, from Chi's perspective, did anything come out of the meeting that we know about between Putin and him? Other than he got a scold, Putin probably got a scolding. But I mean, their relationship has increased dramatically since the war started. Really, I mean, Russia and China have been come together more than they have since Nixon went to China. Quite frankly.
Well, maybe, maybe not. I mean, right now, again, she is has a $20 trillion GDP, maybe. We don't know what truth is exactly on their GDP. And Putin has
Hmm.
a $1 or $2 trillion GDP. So who's the boss here? It's China. So
Yeah.
why does China even need Russia at this point in time? Well, they need Russia because the one thing that China lacks at this point in time in their showdown with us is a mature nuclear stockpile and nuclear ready force. We would call it a triad in the old days, as you were quite familiar with.
Hmm.
And that's the one thing he needs Putin for. But once he meets and surpasses the nuclear stockpile, there's only one thing she's going to think of when he looks at Putin and Russia, and that's lunch. So watch this space. Putin, again, has miserably failed in his promise to take the Ukraine. It is getting really bad. It just was announced this morning, I think it was our time, which would have been afternoon in the Ukraine, that
Hmm.
Russia is essentially withdrawing its officials from the city of Kherson in the south, which is on kind of the north side of the Dnieper River,
Hmm.
which means they're essentially surrendering and withdrawing from Kherson, which essentially means, because they had to do this. The Ukrainians have effectively pontoon bridged across north and south of Kherson, so
Yeah.
effectively potentially enveloping Kherson, trapping Kherson, which they don't want to happen. They just went
Hmm.
through a debacle around Kharkiv in the northeast, where their prized mechanized armored force, the First Guards Tank Army, essentially collapsed.
Yeah.
and left behind immense amounts of ordnance and tanks, which the Ukrainians said, "Thank you very much. We're going to use
Hmm.
them now in the south against Kherson." So it is looking really bad for the Russians, which also, the hardliners in Russia, and there are hardliners to the right of Putin, if it's hard to
Hmm.
believe,
Yeah.
who are pressuring him, said, "You better do something," which, this increases the likelihood of tactical nuclear use. Very concerning.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, for those of you folks out there that say that Mr. Putin won't go nuclear, we in the West have given him every message that would lead him to successfully make that decision to use a nuclear weapon if necessary. It follows in their doctrine, in Russian doctrine on the battlefield, when they are facing a catastrophic loss of territory, and those republics down there, whether you like it or not. The Russian Duma has now annexed them. They had a plebiscite vote that decided to put them into the Russian Federation. I mean, it's a big deal. As Joe Obama, as Joe Biden said to Obama, it's a big effing deal. And the fecklessness and weakness of the United States and NATO really is what's appeasing Putin right now. And you see it in his actions. He goes in. The first appeasement was he felt strong enough to go in the first place. The second one was us not matching parity for parity his nuclear posture when he increased it a couple weeks after the war started. And all of those messages, and then Germany being feckless in their deliveries, first signing up to help the Ukraine, and then their deliveries of armament and supplies and those kind of things. All of those moves appease Putin, and he continues to do the things that he wants to do. He's not withdrawing. I think personally, he's gonna withdraw to just the south side of the Dnieper River there, because it's easier to defend, and they can set up adequate defenses, and then right off to cities like Kherson and the other one, Kharkiv, up in the northeast part of that area. Your thoughts?
Yeah, no, I think it's a full. That mean they have to withdraw to a defensive line just above Crimea, because that is their red line. They will not
Yeah.
surrender the Crimea Peninsula, and that's the danger at this point in time. So it's not just crossing over the river. I mean, they need a full scale withdrawal to reconstitute their defensive lines. This is really bad situation for the Russians. It has been a disaster for the Russians, and they have sent in swarms of Iranian-made drones,
Mm-hmm.
quite impressive. I will acknowledge, but still not making up for the essentially total absence of the Russian Air Force. The two mysteries of this conflict so far are the absence of the Russian Air Force and the little to almost no discussion of cyber activities. Well, just because there's little to no discussion of cyber activities does not mean cyber activities are not going on. I
Right.
would suggest Paul Nakasone, the general in charge, the dual-hatted general in charge of Cyber Command and NSA, has made a few cryptic public statements, which, because of my experience and knowledge, I can interpret. Also,
Mm-hmm.
I've worked a little bit with Paul when he was a colonel. Obviously, he went a little further than me. But I think it shows the effectiveness of the unified Five Eyes. I think it's been surprisingly effective, because you have to throw in. There's also been strong unclassified indicators that China was throwing in its weight behind to
Yeah.
assist the Russians. And if the unified effort of the Five Eyes can essentially shut down Russia and China, that's a big deal. But the second thing is the unexplained absence. Now, one of the things with the few aircraft, combat aircraft, fast jets, they very effectively use them, very effectively integrated them with um, um, the air defense system, short and medium range. They've also there probably was application of cyber force into the aviation domain, which effectively made those burned up engines on the tarmac and things like that. So lots of little trickeries went on, and there's also this one of their main bomber bases. They really don't have a whole lot of Tu-160s and backfires and blinders and the two main Russian bombers. They don't really have a whole lot of them, and they're one of their major bases, roughly halfway in between the Ukraine and Moscow, has been regularly visited by mysterious drones, and they've been losing. This is like Barksdale losing a bunch of smoking hulls of B-52s at Barksdale. This is pretty. The Ukrainians, again, everybody's going, oh, are you a Zelensky supporter? Hey, he's World Economic Forum. Hey, there's U.S. biolabs. All of the above are true, and can they are not mutually exclusive. You've got to give credit to the Ukrainians to have been incredibly innovative in their ability to go back and forth across between special operations, long range fires, tactical, mechanized and armored combat. And use of drones, flipping the Chinese made drones against the Russians. They've shown to be extremely innovative, and Zelensky is very, let's just be honest, he had a number of corrupt regional leaders that flipped, and frankly were trying to assassinate him. Well, I think Zelensky's having the last laugh against his domestic competitors, because he's swapped them out. It was probably not a very pleasant swap out. So you got to hand it to him, and to be totally brutally honest, a lot of the promised supplies from the West and America have not shown up yet.
Well,
what was some absconded with once it got there? Yeah, maybe. But I'll be honest with you too. And having worked a number of these FMS and urgent contingency arms transfers, there's incredible bureaucracy even in the best of times. And
absolutely.
And the drag coefficient of the bureaucracy, you would lose your mind if you knew what was going on. And so,
and John, this is an industrialized warfare, a la World War II, Korea, mainly World War II. Though I mean, this is a big area. I don't think people in the West realize how big Ukraine is, and what type of forces you would need to be able to go in there and first conquer it and then keep it. But this is industrialized warfare, and I'll be honest, I don't think the United States and NATO's logistics system is capable of catching up or keeping up in industrialized warfare anymore. And we've got a Congress that needs to come in and take a real hard look at that, because people in charge of the Department of Defense, I mean, we're throwing $70-80 billion at Ukraine, which, quite frankly, I'm opposed to. I'm all for them fighting for their freedom and everything, but it's not our business, quite frankly. We're not allied with them. They're not in NATO. They're not even a one-on-one ally with us, and I don't really give a damn about the security of Ukraine's border with Russia or who controls it. I give a damn about our border with Mexico and who controls that. And I think most of the American people believe that too. But you're right. I mean, the Ukrainians have been very innovative. Of course, NATO's been in there training them for several years now, years before Putin ever decided to attack. So it looks like the training is taken. And I'll just say it. I know that we have had people in one way or another in the special ops community there advising them on the ground, and Congress is letting it happen, in spite of whether most of the American people would oppose that if they knew about it.
Oh yeah,
frankly. They're doing well. They're doing well. But it still bears out that we have no leader in the world on the West side that has the balls to step up and say, okay, let's stop the killing and see if we can sort this out. They're all the people with power are saying, no, send more. and Biden is talking about Armageddon and all that. And quite frankly, that is not a part of the world that we should be even entertaining an idea that we would use a nuclear weapon or even a conventional strike against Russia if they decide to use a nuclear weapon on the Ukrainian soil, because we are not at war with them and we should not be.
Yeah, my policy has always been clear and consistent from fall of 2021. Is we give enough ordnance and supplies for them to defend themselves, but we drop it right on the other side of the border. From that point on, they're on their own. No support for any cross-border operations. No, the key term is advanced force operations. That's the joint planning term, and that's what I said from day one. Absolutely no advanced force operations, which means we put there's special elements that's their specialty is advanced force. Absolutely not. That's the slippery slope. No way, nothing. But the problem is with any kind of use of nuclear weapons, once that starts, that's going to trigger worldwide conflict. So the
Yep.
Russians pop a nuke. You have this Neil deGrasse Tyson doctor who thinks he's a modern James Earl Jones, that just because it came out of his mouth, it's intelligent. It made this crazy comment. Hey, it's only going to be a tactical nuclear device, so what? Big deal. It's like, I remember the Cold War days where all the lefties were running around saying any nuclear use will end the world. And I think once people start popping nukes, it doesn't matter whether it's in the Ukraine, it's going to trigger worldwide use of nuclear weapons. It's going to
But it shouldn't. But it should not. If the Russians use it within their doctrine a tactical nuclear weapon to save their own bacon on the soil of Ukraine, NATO and the United States should do all their bluster, put their forces on alert, which they should have done a long time ago, and we wouldn't be in this situation. You wouldn't even think about it, and those kind of things. But we are not at war with Russia, and unless the Congress of the United States passes a war declaration, there is no way that we should respond to that with military force. That's my opinion.
Well, interesting concept. I don't think it's going to be as nice, neat, and clean as that. There's all kinds
No.
of unpredictable outcomes that, that's what we should make it very clear. No use, Russia, no use. We're not at war with Russia. But believe me, Russia and China are at war with us. And so this is just a convenient theater of operations for them. So I think we should bring our nuclear forces, which are in pretty sorry shape. We're by treaty allowed. I think it's about 1,500, 1,550. Unclassified numbers show us as having a roughly 1,450. Hey, we got 50 to 100 nukes that we could bring back online, which sends a strong message of resolve to prevent and deter any attempted use of tactical nukes.
Well, yeah, but none of that. Getting new weapons online or old weapons being brought back to line, none of that works unless you matched your postures with the same parity. And the second that Putin increased his nuclear posture, regardless of whatever the indicators were that our intelligence was seeing, I have no confidence in our intelligence, by the way. The president should have matched parity with his nuclear forces, because now we talk about it from a perspective of flat-footedness, and NATO is going to do their regularly scheduled nuclear exercise. I think that may be ongoing at this moment, but that's nothing. That's nothing. What would be something is if we increased our posture in the United States with our strategic weapons, and also put the NATO forces on alert.
Well, that's what I'm saying. We have
but
50.
we haven't.
We have 50 to 100 warheads, strategic warheads we can bring online. And as you know from your days, that is an incredible message to the Russians and Chinese. They understand that. I mean, there's been many cases of a Soviet submarine, ballistic missile submarine approaching to the United States. And all we would do is, remember quite well, we'd bring a few more B-52s on alert very visibly to the Christmas tree at bases. Guess what? that Soviet submarine would start turning away from the United States. Happened many
But
times.
we have no air forces on alert in NATO or the United States. We only have sea launched ballistic missiles and ICBMs in their holes, and none of their postures have been increased based on Putin's own increase or his threats. And as long as we are being flat-footed in this way, feckless, and I would put this right on Joe Biden's head. He's solely responsible for this. We have no ability to deter him from dropping a tactical nuke on Ukraine. And if we respond to that, if he does it, and get into a World War III conflagration, it's all on the United States. It really is. It's a disappointing time in our country.
Well, that's right. I mean, Biden, it is, as commander in chief, it's his job to, if he's going to be demonstrative in his nuclear deterrence is all about clarity and resolve. And so he needs to demonstrate, and that's exactly what I'm talking about, increase the strategic nuclear posture. If we're going to have a missile test, we do a missile test. We don't back off from a missile test because it might piss off the Chinese or the Russians. We've done that several times recently. That's a very, very bad idea. If you're going to do a missile test, you do a missile test.
That's part of the messaging that tells Mr. Putin that he can use a tactical nuke if he wants to on Ukraine. And quite frankly, honestly, the way our forces are structured, even in NATO with its nuclear capability, those forces, even if we put them on alert, the policy and message that it sends is that don't attack NATO because Ukraine's not in NATO, and that's an issue. That's an issue. This whole mess could have been resolved through statesmanship and still could be resolved through statesmanship, and I just don't see it happening from anybody in our government at this point. Let's shift gears here. You mentioned Connect. Connect is a company that's headed by, I believe, a Chinese PLA officer. That's who I think it is. That's my opinion. And they were caught red-handed working in swing states with election officials and putting data on Chinese servers, and every employee working in China was given super administrative rights to all of this data. What are the implications of that, John? I mean, look, folks, John started the Virginia Election Integrity Task Force, expanded it to the National Election Integrity Task Force about a year and a half ago, I believe, if I remember right. So John is not just a military expert. He is well-studied on what's going on with election integrity, and this Connect story is really troublesome.
Yeah, this is explosive and incendiary, and really the dam has now burst. And this was Catherine Engelbrecht and her colleague Greg Phillips at True the Vote, who started talking about this about a month and a half ago. And Connect said, hey, we're going to sue you. And then next thing, out of left field, no pun intended, the left wing district attorney for Los Angeles, George Gascon, indicts and seeks the arrest and extradition of Eugene Wu. He is a naturalized American citizen, but clearly has very strong connections and is associated with a number of people who have very strong connections to the Chinese Communist Party. And what in the world is George Gascon? Why is he involved? Well, it's actually one of his deputies. But George, just like my own county here, where my current registrar, who just announced their resignation, as soon as Attorney General Miyares announced the criminal indictment of my registrar, who I've been battling with, which started that whole project. She's now under criminal indictment for November 20. A lot of the evidence seems to have been provided by the current registrar. And when I challenged the current registrar, he announced his resignation. But the bottom line, these people are turning each other in, and that's great. That's a victory. George Gascon of Los Angeles obviously sensed personal liability. Poll Chief is the software suite that has all the PII. When I'm an election officer, the county has all my bank account information. And guess what? It looks like we were using Connect also here, and I believe might have been a decision to pull that. But that means all of my bank account information is in China, including access to my bank account. But who knows what else? And so this is explosive. And so now there's been intimations that further actual voting data, not just the poll worker data, but the actual voting data was also stored. This is the dam. And what it really proves was Donald J. Trump was right once again.
Yeah, I mean, didn't he mention that he thought China was
Many
messing in
times.
our elections many times?
Many times, everybody, oh, come on, there's no way, come on, you're just making this stuff. Liberal DA of Los Angeles, George Gascon, indicts and asked for the arrest and extradition of Koenig CEO. Yeah, it's bad. And yes, China was involved, where they're storing data in China. But this stuff didn't touch the internet. Everybody wants to quibble. When I gave sworn testimony in Arizona on behalf of Kerry Lake and Mark Fincham, I mean, this stuff was, oh, come on, we don't store anything. Nothing touches the internet. Well, if you store any kind of data other than that immediate physical server, you're touching the internet. And
you absolutely are. I mean, I remember we did a show. It was one of the first shows you did with me on your Virginia election integrity effort, and then that it was expanding to the national level. And you said in that show, you said, Rob, they are storing election data overseas somewhere. Yeah, I mean, you confirmed it.
Yeah. There's a number of people who have done the technical forensics to demonstrate this. This is a hard topic, and this is but you got to speak in policy language and legislator language, because all the technical people to get together and start talking in technical terms. I can't make sense out of this. But the reality is, if you're storing it on even a home computer that's hooked to the internet, guess what? You're touching the internet.
Exactly.
So I mean, all these, it's abject. Is it willful ignorance? Well, I think at this point in time, you'd have to call it willful ignorance, which is a fancy way of saying people are lying. And this is let's get real, folks. When you run a complex operation like voting, which can and should be done paper only without machines, guess what? You're introducing all these opportunities for unwitting mistakes and winning mistakes and winning action. So there is no reason. HAVA 2002, the federal law which created the election machine racket, does not say you will and shall use election machines. That is not what the federal law says. It says if you do use these new things called election machines, we're creating this body called the Election Assistance Commission, and they're going to prescribe standards. But for what? Election. Everybody wants to use the term election machine. Well, there's other peripherals. So, people want to be clever and say, oh, that's a poll book. That's not an election machine. A printer tied to the election machine or poll book. That's not an election. No. You have to look at it as a holistic system, including Poll Chief, the software suite by Koenig that stored the private information of U.S. citizens in China. You have to look at this holistically, and making it more and more complex just gives more and more opportunities for bad people to do bad things.
Yeah, and the initial reporting on this was that it was in the swing states, the big six swing states. Primarily. Is that like Michigan was the first one that popped? And
Well,
is that accurate?
I mean, the whole reason why George Gascon took action was because it was L.A. County, and L.A. County and the L.A. Basin has been a swamp of corruption. A lot of it driven by Chinese communist influence money for a decade. I mean, the
Yeah.
number of people are not, this is not making national headlines. The FBI, and there are still a few honest people at the FBI, have been making numerous arrests of the LA City Council, LA County. I mean, all these, I mean, there's been numerous people for clearly fraud and corruption. I
Hmm.
mean, there's been numerous photographs, FBI photographs of all the U.S. currency wrapped in Chinese, the little tapes that surround bundles of money, and it's like,
Right.
well,
Hmm.
that's funny. Why is that suitcase filled with U.S. currency wrapped in all these Chinese currency markers? That's crazy. I mean, so this is it's insanity. So George Gascon took action because he
Hmm.
knew he would be personally liable, because that was storing the information of many, many hundreds, probably thousands of election officials in LA County in
Yeah.
China.
Absolutely. And if they're in the swing states and these other areas like LA County, uh, what about the 2022 election? I mean, we're 2.5 weeks out here from
I'd
the
say,
midterm
American
election day.
citizen, this is my book, The Nation Will Follow. If you want, if you believe there is an elite, a swamp, an international set of globalists, all of those exist, and it is true. They are built upon and receive permission from the nanny staters at the county level in America. So citizens swarm your county and dominate the election, work behind the counter as an election official. None of this poll watching silliness, which is
Hmm.
normally in most states a county GOP function, and
Yeah.
usually I've seen them have absolutely zero effect in Virginia. A total waste of time. Sorry.
Yeah.
The real action. Do you want to be in front of the counter, or do you want to be behind the counter counting the votes? Foot stomp. You want to be behind the counter today, first thing in the morning. Go to your county website and look it up and volunteer. I guarantee you, even at this late stage, they are desperate for
Yeah.
the election officials.
Absolutely. I guarantee you they are. And you mentioned your book, The Nation Will Follow. And what's the website to go buy that? Is it on Amazon?
Well, we have a dedicated website, thenationwillfollow.com, and we
Okay.
should have it up in the next day or two, so that Colonel Rob Maness, a man of stature and influence, will receive proper credit. Go to thenationwillfollow.com/Rob. Okay, so that
Okay.
way, we appreciate the partnership with Rob, and Rob's been a tireless advocate and supporter of my efforts. Want to make sure, thank you very much, Rob. So the nation will follow .com // Rob. So the nation will follow / Rob.
Okay, outstanding. Just so you know, John, YouTube took all of our shows down. I think we did 3 shows on election stuff from the time you started till just before the 2020 election. They took all of our shows down, said it was misleading about an election interference. And then about 2 months later, they found enough videos they didn't like to cancel my show channel. The Rob Maness Show is no longer on YouTube. We are exclusively on Rumble. However, I do have my personal channel at Colonel Rob Maness Retired on YouTube that this show goes out to. But eventually, they'll remove those videos too and cancel it. But I appreciate you writing the book. I've appreciated your work all along. I look forward to having you back soon. And good luck with the elections.
All righty. Thank you, Rob. You too. And I'll be an election official on election day. And American citizen, if you don't like what's going on, you need to surge on November 8th. And you need to particularly surge and be an election official behind the counter.
Exactly right. I volunteered to do that this year myself in our elections, even though we have paper ballots that get scanned. Even if a machine is a scanner machine, it can still be messed with. There's software in that.
Yeah, that's
and
another
everything.
game. They'll
So
say it's not an election machine; it's a tabulator.
tabulator, yeah,
That's a machine. That's part of
yeah,
the holistic system.
yeah. Anything that has electronic data moving in and about it, or electrons, can be messed with, even without wires connected to it these days. So that's retired Colonel John Mills, senior DoD official, former, and author of The Nation Will Follow. Thank you so much, John. Have a great one, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you, Rob. Always an honor to be with you.
Well, folks, there you have it. Wide-ranging discussion, but I think you'll find it interesting. Colonel Mills is a good patriot. There's some great stuff in the book. It's not just about election integrity. It's also about this little thing called the deep state, and that'll get me in trouble. Okay, YouTube people, just relax. It's an opinion. But John has some factual experiences in there. You should really go get the book at thenationwillfollow.com. Hey, /Rob. I know he would appreciate it. But more importantly, we need to get the word out of the truth and the facts. And that is what this show is all about. So until next week, I'm Rob Manus.